So this is session 2. If you were already in session 1, then you know that the biggest problem with trying to get a true natural birth is fear. Because as long as you are afraid of your own body, afraid of the pain, afraid of the interventions, afraid of crumbling under the pressure, afraid of something going wrong, then it doesn't matter how much education that you get inside of natural birth courses or the books out there or understanding even how your body works. As long as you are afraid, it doesn't matter. It will just go in one ear and out the other. And I've noticed this myself because when I was a first-time mom, I consumed natural birth education for 9 months. I knew how my body worked. I understood about the fear, tension, pain cycle, which you are going to learn about inside of this session. And I also understood how the labor stages were fluid. I understood that you didn't actually need cervical checks. I understood that my body was just going to do it. So education on its own, while helpful in understanding how physiological birth works, true natural birth, it's not enough. And I recognized this as a first-time mom when I was having my true natural birth experience and planning my birth because I did everything right. I hired a midwife. I was planning a home birth. I had a doula. I understood about the fear, tension, pain cycle. I was doing the pain coping techniques. I had all the breathing techniques under my belt. I was doing the exercises. I knew the labor positions. I knew the labor stages like the back of my hand. And I understood that intervention is what leads to more pain. Unfortunately, because I did not get past my fears, I still ended up falling into the fear traps and I fell into the natural birth traps and I had my birth derailed by the medical system. Not as bad as a lot of my clients have had where they were pushed into inductions and C-sections they didn't want, but still it was a very close call. If I had not had the midwife that I had that day, who was standing for me and had understood about true natural birth and had been practicing for so many years that she was 2 years away from retirement, if she had not been the one attending me, I would have had a C-section. Because there are women that had the same story I did, and they did get pushed into that induction, and they did fall into those traps, and they did have a C-section. And afterwards, they were wondering, well, what went wrong? I talk about this inside my book, Your Empowered Birth, in the chapters 1 and 2, where I talk about the natural birth traps and why birth goes wrong, with the composite character of Kate, who she thought she was doing everything right, and she ended up with a C-section. So if you're paying attention to this particular training, but you have not gone and released your fear, I'm just going to remind you that tackling those fears at the basic level will help you to really absorb as much as you need to within the basic education for true natural birth. Because true natural birth is very different from how the medical system teaches it. It's so different, in fact, that it's the difference between having organic ice cream from the dairy farm that you know that the cows that gave you the milk, that gave you the ice cream, like you can actually go out and pet them, versus going to the supermarket and getting a pint of something that says frozen dessert, but looks like ice cream in the picture. That's the difference. So natural birth in the medical system and in our birth culture is technically not natural at all. And I know there's a lot of arguments about all births being natural, but if you truly want to have a true natural birth experience, you have to let go of that cultural every birth is natural idea. Remember, we aim for true natural birth and then we pull back only as needed. So this is going to help you understand how your body works. It's going to help you release those misconceptions out there about having to plan a medicalized birth just in case something goes wrong. And you're also going to understand some pain coping techniques in this session. All right, so let's dive in. So I'm going to start with the question, why do so many moms start out planning a natural birth, but they end up throwing the birth plan out the window? It's not just about fear. And this question is going to keep coming up over and over because this is really it. This is why natural birth has started to fail. This is why we have a C-section rate of 1 in 3 women having a C-section, why induction seems to be handed out like candy, why so much birth trauma is happening. That's like a 45% reported birth trauma rate climbing every year, and why it suddenly seems like birth isn't working. It's not that birth isn't working, birth is designed perfectly. It's that our culture and our medical system is really putting you into those natural birth traps. So, in this class, what we're going to explore is why most natural birth education leads to medical interventions in birth. You're going to learn the 4 true natural birth stages of labor and birth, the 3 tips for a peaceful, more painless natural birth experience based on my own experience and what I've done with my clients, and the secret about cervical dilation that your OB probably doesn't want you to know, but I'm going to tell you anyway. So, the reason that natural birth is so hard to get is because you're falling into the natural birth traps. And I talk about this inside my book, Your Empowered Birth, in chapter 1 about the natural birth traps, and chapter 2, why birth stopped working. I talk about this a little bit more in my story of my 2 births with my son and my daughter. And I have basically coined the term natural birth traps because of the fact that so many things that we think are associated with natural birth are actually sabotaging and undermining our confidence to have that natural birth experience. So, why a lot of natural birth plans fail is because you were taught that you need something outside of yourself to birth naturally. And what this basically looks like is you're told that you're not in labor just because you're not dilating on time. You're told that you aren't in labor because you aren't in enough pain. You're put on an arbitrary timeline for birth. Your own deep intuition of feeling that something is off or that you're actually fine are overruled in favor of the medical system guidelines and charts. So here's the empowered birth secrets of how my clients have been able to get true natural birth experiences, even when the odds are basically stacked against them. First of all, you need to remember babies are born accidentally without a doctor or midwife, and even high risk pregnancies like twins, breech, vaginal birth after cesarean. I've seen stories of moms who have been on their way to the hospital with twins, and one of the twins is breech, and she's having a VBAC, and all of a sudden, baby A is coming out, and then followed by baby B, and she just does it. So even in the situation where you're trying to get to the hospital on time, sometimes babies just don't wait. So why is it that if this mom had gone into the hospital, they would have said, oh, this is an automatic C-section because you have twins, they're breech, and you're doing a VBAC? That's not allowed. But she was able to have this car birth, and she wasn't expecting it because I think she was like 37 weeks and she was planning to have her C-section at 39 weeks, but babies just came. And when you recognize that, when you really see that, oh, I could be on the way to the hospital and have a car birth, instead of that being a scary thing, recognizing that your body is going to do this whether they have intervention or not allows you to take your power back in that situation. Be like, I don't actually need to schedule this C-section. I don't need to schedule this induction. I don't need to have a doctor catch my baby. I don't need to have these vaginal exams. I don't even need to be at the hospital until the last possible minute, or I can stay home. I can call the midwife to me if I really want her there, but she doesn't have to be there the whole time. When you really recognize that even in a high risk situation, you can have the birth you want, suddenly that gives you your power back and you realize you have the confidence to birth. Because when birth isn't messed with, it usually works. It can also be relatively painless, or you think you're not that far into labor based on arbitrary signs that don't mean anything, such as dilation. And in my case, I was 6 centimeters and then I closed back up to 3. And the next day I had a baby in my arms. So it really doesn't matter. Dilation really doesn't matter. None of the labor signs, as you're going to find out in this training, actually mean a thing. And if you keep thinking that you need something outside yourself to birth, and you keep following the arbitrary signs for birth and labor, you're going to keep falling into those natural birth traps because nobody actually fits in that box. So, before we get deeper into this training, I just want to let you take a break because I know sometimes you might want to binge on these videos and maybe other times you want to watch one or two. I've broken this session into multiple different videos so that you can choose to either watch them all at once or take a break. And I also want to remind you that this training series also comes with two guides for you: the Empowered Mom's Guide to True Natural Birth and 20 Things to Avoid If You Want a Natural Birth. So, those are the list of my 20 natural birth traps, the most common things that undermine your confidence and sabotage your natural birth. But the Empowered Mom's Guide to True Natural Birth goes deeper with some of those natural birth traps, including telling you like some of the risks and why things are the way they are to help you get past your fear, to recognize why it's a trap in the first place. It's a quick little ebook guide, and I included it as part of this session because there's just so much about natural birth, especially true natural birth, the physiological process. And I didn't want to put way too much in there because then you don't know what you're picking and choosing. And I wanted to make sure that this was quick, easy, accessible. You can get the overview. A lot of women who have already gone through this training before in the past, when it was a live workshop, they had the success that they were looking for. They understood they could have their VBAC, and they went and they did it. And they were able to have that beautiful, true natural birth experience. But I just wanted to remind you that if you do want to go deeper than these videos, you do have those guides available for you. And I'm just going to let you take a sip of water. I'm going to get my own sip of water. I'll come back and we can start the next video, or you can just go on to the next one. So I'll see you soon.